After beating up one of the students, Eric gets expelled from school. The only place that accepts him after that is a boarding school, but things there are much worse than he imagines. Eric's story takes place in Sweden during the 1950s. At 16, Eric Ponti is a bit of a rebel and the leader of a gang. One day, he beats up a fellow student at his school and gets expelled. Since he's just a teenager, he needs to continue studying, but the only place willing to accept him is a boarding school for boys. His mother, Karen, thinks this change is a good opportunity for the kid to straighten up in life. She asks him to promise that he will be a good student and, more importantly, a good person. On the train to the boarding school, a beautiful girl sits near Eric, who loses all his tough guy aura when he sees her. They both get off the train at the same station, and she asks if he's going to the boarding school. Eric feels embarrassed and lies, saying he's enlisting in the army. At the boarding school, Eric is greeted by the headmaster, who assures him that the school is based on teamwork and that older students help younger. Eric promises that he will adapt well there despite his history, and he's serious. He's determined to have a better life without violence now that he's away from his stepfather and everyone. Looking for the student council president, Eric enters the Olympus, an area reserved for older students. As soon as he enters, a guy named Otto makes it clear that he should have knocked on the door. Bernhard, the council president, says he has to always wear the school uniform. Hearing this, Eric takes the uniform out of his backpack to change right there in the middle of the room, which makes the other boys laugh at him. After getting to know the school and settling into his room, Eric goes to the cafeteria and ends up meeting someone special, his crush from the train, named Maria. She works at the boarding school as a cook. While Eric is there, happy to see Maria again, there's a commotion at the table of the older students. A boy accidentally knocks over a glass and Otto, one of the council members, hits him on the head with cutlery as punishment. Eric is surprised because none of the teachers did anything to stop Otto or complain to him afterward. They just kept eating as if nothing had happened. Later, Eric returns to his room and meets his roommate Pierre. He is a shy and nice guy, and he have knowledge about the punishments that the older students impose on the younger one. As the two talks, Pierre explains that no one defends themselves against the punishments because attacking the council members results in immediate expulsion. At that moment, Otto's gang barges into the room to inspect things. But that's just an excuse to plant a cigarette and incriminate the two. The weekend arrives, and Eric can visit his family. But things at home aren't much better. Ike, Eric's stepfather, is very violent and beats him with a belt for every little thing the kid does. His mother just stands there, paralyzed with fear. Back at school, Eric sees Otto being a jerk and abusive to other students. And to make things worse, during classes, the teachers don't value his participation. He doesn't have a peaceful day either at school or at home. The only good moments are with Pierre, who shows him a stash of cigarettes hidden in the forest. On the way back to the school building, they run into Maria and a friend riding horses. Just to tease Eric, she calls him a soldier, since he had said he was going to enlist when they first met. The joke only makes Eric like her more, but Pierre warns that it's against the rules to get involved with staff. Later, in the cafeteria, the students are informed that Johan, the boy who broke the glass and got hit by Ott, had called his mother to complain about the school's problems. But unfortunately for him, she didn't care and even snitched on him to the principal. As punishment for this, Otto hands him a leather glove, which means he's challenging Johan to a fight later. Speaking of Otto, Eric was summoned to appear before the student council because of that cigarette that was planted in his room. He tries to say that it was Otto's setup, but ends up being punished anyway, being forbidden to go home for several weekends. Without backing down, Eric makes it clear that he's not afraid of the council. The next day, Johan steps up for a fight with Otto, who tells the boy to make the first move. When Johan tries to throw a punch, Otto blocks and hits back harder. It's obvious the kid doesn't stand a chance, but the crowd keeps watching the fight and taunting Johan for being weaker. Unable to watch this torture, Eric runs off into the forest. This catches Maria's attention, who was also there witnessing the scene. Since Eric left, she understands that he doesn't support that violence. Later, Eric shows interest in joining the swimming team, which is one of his hobbies. At his previous school, he was also very involved in sports, but Otto says he can't because the pool is reserved for older students. So he looks for other things to do, like studying in the library. Seeing that Eric is doing fine, the council decides they need to make his punishment worse. However, this decision is made without Bernhard, who is the president. Otto did this on purpose because despite Bernhard being arrogant, he likes to follow the rules. Meanwhile, Maria finds Eric in the library and confesses that, just like him, she can't stand seeing acts of violence among the students. During the conversation, she also reveals that she shouldn't be reading because she's just a cook. Knowing this, Eric becomes the ultimate romantic and, without Maria noticing, borrows some books from the library to give to her later. Before handing over the books, he has another meeting with the council about his new punishment. But quickly, Eric realizes that they shouldn't make any decisions without the president, who is spending the weekend with his family. Unlike the student council, you can decide to help the channel. Just leave your like on this video and subscribe to keep watching incredible recaps. Oh, and share this recap with your friends too. Now back to the story. Otto gets furious with Eric's audacity and orders a new punishment on the sports field. When they arrive there, he meets Coach Tosse and his dog. Eric is all happy with the dog because it looks like the one he had at home. The coach mentions that he knows about Eric's athletic abilities demonstrated in other places he studied and his disciplinary history. He offers Eric the chance to join the swim team because, contrary to what Otto said, there was no minimum age to participate. Later, Maria finally receives the book sent by Eric, along with a note inviting her to the dance that night. Not far from there, Otto's gang forces Eric to pay his punishment, which is to dig a huge hole near the football field. If he finishes quickly, he'll have the rest of the day free and can go to the dance without any problems. So, he strives to complete the task mission. After digging for a while, he takes a little break and remembers the day he set a new swimming record at his previous school. Instead of at least congratulating the kid, his stepfather just snaps the belt on his back several times. Suddenly, Eric is awakened by Otto's gang. They approve of the hole the boy dug, but say there can't be anything open there because what if someone falls, right? Pissed off, Eric imagines himself hitting Otto with the shovel, but since he promised not to cause trouble, he has only one thing to do. Close the hole he spent the whole afternoon digging. At night, everyone has fun at the dance, except Maria, who thinks she's been stood up without knowing that Eric is being punished. At the end of the party, still no sign of Eric, she leaves with a broken heart. She even thinks about throwing a stone at Eric's window, but changes her mind. At breakfast the next day, Bernhard shows up at the school and notices Eric's dirty hands, who confesses that he was forced to dig a hole and then fill it as punishment. He says that because of this, he couldn't even go to the dance. Hearing this, Maria understands that she wasn't being stood up. Since Otto isn't much of a fan of hearing some truths about himself, he decides that it was Eric's provocation and decides to punish the kid. Again! He hits Eric on the head with a sharp object just like he did with Johann. Used to getting beaten, Eric asks if that's all Otto has for him. But while he's talking, his head is bleeding. As the only somewhat sensible adult around, the coach takes Eric to the infirmary. He asks Eric to avoid trouble because he can get more punishments. But the teenager says that the punishments will never stop if he doesn't do something about it. Faced with this decision, the coach says he can use sports to face his adversaries. While these two are in the infirmary, Bernhard confronts Otto for taking over the council presidency while he was away. And like the jerk Otto is, he just scoffs at the guy. After leaving the infirmary, Eric meets Maria, who checks if the wound was really treated. She can't resist and caresses his face, leading to a romantic atmosphere that ends in their first kiss. After getting a kiss from his crush, Eric returns to his room more hopeful than ever. But when he gets there, he finds a leather glove on his bed, which means he's been challenged. By Otto, of course. Who else would it be? When it's time for the fight, Otto says they've reached that point because Eric doesn't know how to show respect. Eric responds that he only respects those who deserve it. Then Otto responds with several punches. Even while getting beaten up, Eric tries to contain his anger because of the promise not to cause trouble. While he's there taking a beating, he remembers the days of freedom in the city, back when he was the leader of a gang that stole music records to resell them later. When he lived there, he also had to do things he didn't like dealing with his stepfather. One day he had gone to the restaurant where the old man worked to drop off some things he had forgotten at home and accidentally bumped into a waiter who dropped a tray with porcelain utensils. Because of this accident, Eric received a scolding in front of everyone. Upset after hearing complaints, he went to meet his friends to go collect money from some people who owed them. Since Eric was feeling down, Bori, one of the guys from the gang, offered to do the job for him. But Eric refused. When it came time to collect the money, Eric changed completely, to the point of scaring the guy with just his voice. At home, Eric was greeted by Ike, who welcomed him with some slaps for being humiliated by his stepson at work. The blows brought Eric back to the present, where he was also getting beaten up. This kid really can't catch a break. He's all beaten up and Otto makes an example out of him of what will happen to those who don't respect the council. Further ahead, there's another flashback. This time, Eric was being praised for his swimming skills and academic performance, but everything starts to go wrong when he finds out that Bori tried to rob a record store alone and got caught. As a result, the director found out about the gang's robbery and selling operations. Even though the director called the kid a mafia leader, he gave Eric a second chance because he sees potential in him. But to avoid being expelled, he needed to disband the gang. After that conversation, Eric confronted Bori, who trembled in fear, and began to apologize as soon as he saw the guy. Disappointed, Eric handed over control of the gang to Bori, as he had promised the director. Besides, he didn't have a gang to provoke fights. For him, it was a matter of earning respect. After leaving that life behind, Eric tried to be a regular student who didn't sell stolen records. What he didn't know was that Bori had told his father about the schemes, who told Eric's stepfather. The guy got really angry and took advantage of Eric's mother not being home and beat him up, but this time, Eric stood his ground and faced him for the first time. This made Ike change the course of things. He took Eric's dog and a rifle and left. Later, he released the dog to try to shoot him, but Eric begged him not to do anything and apologized for his own arrogance. Like the jerk guy he was, Ike saw the boy humiliating himself to save the dog and shot anyway. This left Eric full of anger because that dog was his only true friend, and he unleashed all that fury on Bori for blabbing. If it weren't for that, his dog would still be alive. That was the reason for Eric's expulsion from the previous school, and the reason he was transferred to the boarding school, where he's still getting beaten up. At the end of the beating, Otto extends his hand, as if they were going to make peace. The same thing his stepfather used to do when finishing his punishment. That was enough to boil Eric's blood, who told Otto to get out of there, or he wouldn't be responsible for his actions. As he throws himself at Otto, he realizes that Maria is in the middle of the crowd, watching the fight. He didn't want her to see him like that, violent, but now that she had seen it, there was no reason to stop. In the end, Otto's so beaten up that he can't speak or even see out of one eye. While Otto is taken to the hospital, Eric goes to the infirmary, where the nurse comments that the teaching methods of the boarding school are effective for the young people. Upon hearing this, Eric feels sad because he will surely be expelled, and things will continue as they always have there. He goes back to his room to pack his things, but Pierre tries to stop him, saying that defeating a council member like that wasn't against the rules, believe it or not. However, Eric doesn't feel like a winner because his outburst of anger made Maria distance herself from him. Pierre insists that he shouldn't give up because he has established a precedent at the boarding school. Meanwhile, a council member goes to the hospital to visit Otto, who is upset because he lost and no one punished Eric for it. Back to the protagonist, Eric calls his mother to tell her about what's going on at that school, but his stepfather answers. He stays silent, but Eric figures it's him just by his breathing, so he decides to hang up. Out of nowhere, Otto's henchmen show up and warn that he will suffer consequences for what he did. Before the situation gets worse, Bernhard interrupts and lets Eric leave. Time passes, and Eric still isn't expelled from the boarding school. Since it seems like his friend will continue there, Pierre suggests he sign up for the district swimming tournament to humiliate the council again. But Eric, being the ultimate romantic he is, doesn't want to be a symbol of the excluded. He just wants to win Maria back. At school, one of the council members, named Leffler, is talking to Bernhard, saying that he needs to convince the director to expel Eric. But Bernhard responds that if he does that, Otto will also be expelled. Sometime later, Eric goes to talk to Maria to apologize for letting her down, but she's still upset. She says she's leaving the boarding school in search of a better future and thought Eric would be the perfect companion. She saw him as a fighter, but in the duel with Otto, she realized he's just a loser who gives in to the worst impulses. If you want to know more series like this, without wasting time watching everything, comment part 2, so I can bring you the summary of more cool stuff. So, there you have it folks. I helped you save a few hours of your time. All I ask is that you share the video so that other people can see this super recap too. Feel hugged by me. Oh, watch that video there.